So today I have the extreme pleasure of having both Eve and Steve on the line with me right now. So first off, thank you folks for being so gracious and waiting for me for so long. Hopefully I won't botch this up too much. The first thing I want to talk about, because we talk about this a lot, is that you are partners in life. You are also partners in art. I, of course, am with my significant other, and we are partners on certain ventures. So this is the part where you're going to tell me that it's love and bliss 24/7, on and off all the time, right?
Yeah, sure. What's funny, we didn't start working together as a team for 22 years.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
We always, we're both creative people, but I started out as a writer and then an author, and
Sure.
he was making artworks.
And we would work together on
And
projects, but never like
as creative
really,
people, you're constantly in conversation. What do you think? Give me your feedback.
Sure.
We depended on each other, but we never collaborated per se until 3 years ago.
Yep.
And we had this opportunity to create a work for a show in Rutland, Vermont.
that I was
We had been talking for some time. What if we did this? What if you made an artwork
Yep.
and then I made words to write on the artwork?
right.
Yes.
And we said, we've got this show coming up. We'll try it one time and see how it goes. And if it's terrible, we'll never do it again.
Right.
Okay.
And it turned out we loved it. We got great feedback. Everybody, great reception. And we've just never stopped working together since then.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Look at that. So now what happens when that moment comes? Not that it ever comes, but let's say that Stephen put something together and you're like, yeah, this isn't working. It's not going to work. I mean, and you love this person. So you're like, what do you do then?
This was the conversation we were just having before we started this interview. Because we're actually working on a new concept and stuff. I'm sort of still figuring out the mechanics of how I'm actually going to make
he's great. He'll show me something and he'll go, so what do you think? And I'll go, that good, huh?
Yeah. Gee,
don't hold back.
Yeah, don't hold back. But I like problem solving. I like always being on the edge of success and failure. If everything that we're doing is easy and just happens, then we're not making good work. So I like pushing that edge. And we're very honest.
I think we are very honest,
Yeah.
but I think if we hadn't been together all this time until now, I don't think that level of trust and honesty that need to go together, sort of like, I trust you to be honest, and I promise not to have my feelings too hurt.
Right.
Oh, sure. No, I totally get that. Now, have you guys done the crisscross, which is, okay, so today, Stephen, instead of doing my day job, I'm going to be doing more of the writing thing. Whereas with you, Eve, you're going to turn around and do what he does. Are you capable of switching it up a bit?
Well, in terms of
the actual art process, like, are you capable of doing the photography end of things, or the more actual on paper sort of things like he does?
Well, no.
I mean,
I figured all these years he would teach you, like, well, since you're here.
The part is her degrees are in photography.
Yes, that is how we
Right.
We were both studying photography at RIT in Rochester, New York, when we met. And I was in a program that was the master's program. Steve was in the undergrad program. And there were very different programs. My program focused on lots of philosophy and lots of words. And so that's where I thrived. And the technical stuff, you were saying earlier that in your relationship, your husband is the technical guy. That's who he's the technical guy in our relationship in all things, including in photography. And I just completely am very comfortable and happy with him being the one who creates the imagery. We talk about it, we talk about the themes, and then I go off and I create words, and then I bring them back and I say, what do you think of this?
When I've spent the last almost 30 years, so much of the work that I make before were working together is really about problem solving for an idea. And I'd have an idea of what I wanted to do, whether it was printing on some rare handmade paper and then going, how are we going to do this? And sometimes it would take a few weeks. Sometimes it might take a year to sort of just think through a process on how I want to work.
But what's great is that because we both come from a photographic background, we can speak the same language.
Absolutely.
He'll be telling me, here's what I'm thinking of doing, and I know exactly what he's talking about.
Or here's what I'm referencing historically in this process, but I'm trying to blend it with this.
Yeah.
And because your background is so strong in the arts, we can have those conversations.
So I think we complement each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You betcha. That's what I was considering, because I knew that you had gone to school for this. So I was like, okay, there's that point. So now on the flip side, Stephen, so let's say, for instance, I'm a writer myself, and I know what it's like to get writer's block, and it makes me want to hurt somebody. So let's say, for instance, she gets in that funk where it's like you have a project and now she can't write. Are you able to kind of come in and be her backup and be like, all right, let me problem solve it for you. Let me write it for you. Let me do something for you. Is it possible?
I'd say yes, because I actually helped you find a conclusion to your second book.
That is true. That is true. Again, that sort of synergy where we're constantly bouncing ideas back and forth. I'm stuck. What do you think? And he gave me some thoughts, and he ended up bringing me to the perfect conclusion for my second book. So that was right. It was like, it's okay not to have a nice, happy little tied up with a bow kind of ending.
And I think in the pieces that we make together, there are times that sometimes, well, you'll usually let me hear the text that you're going to do before you put it down.
Yeah.
And I'll be sitting there looking at the image, and I'm just trying to feel what she's writing. Occasionally, I'll make a suggestion of, can we do this word or not that? Or can we maybe not have that?
So it's always a conversation.
Very rare, though. Normally, we like to say that I'm making the silent movie and she's making the soundtrack. And so far, that's always meshed really well.
Okay.
So that's been really great.
But I don't think that we would be making these works alone. Like, I wouldn't create these works by myself, and I don't think you would either. We would both be doing different things.
Well, and I would maybe the style of work that I'm doing, but it's very different without the words. Not only from the fact that they're words, but they're also texture and content and detail within the piece. And it causes different parts of your brain to fire. So now, like, when I'm actually making the visual part of the piece, or my visual part of the piece, I'm leaving whole areas dark or areas white, knowing that she's going to be adding words and content to these places later.
He's leaving spaces for me.
Right. So I'm actually, when I'm working, considering doing that in all the pieces, because otherwise it just doesn't work the same way. So I'm thinking about, and when I'm making the piece, I've said this to you every single time, after she puts the words on, I always like the piece better. It's never been the case I didn't like the piece better. And if only just from a visual standpoint of, I've left these empty spaces and now they're filled with texture and handwriting. And then when you start to read it and I hear it, it just adds a whole nother level to it.
And that's something I always like to point out to people, is that all the words on the pieces are done by me, by hand. There's no, like, I get down on the floor with either paint or some archival pens and write the words into the piece. Yeah. So there's no sort of, premeditated process except me standing in front of the work, and then I just go do it. And people say, well, what if you make a mistake?
Cross it
and
out.
I say, well, then I cross it out and I keep going.
Look at that.
You got a work of art that's 30 feet long. I'm not printing it.
You're not reprinting.
Absolutely. No, I get you. I do. So now I do think it's important to ask this, because most of my friends are artisans of some type or another, and we're all living kind of the current climate right now. So my question to you is, I have dear friends of mine who literally can't write, who can't create, who have lost that hope and that spark right now. So how are you managing amongst all the mayhem that's going on? How do you keep that outside so you're able to create on the inside?
Well, I think one of my favorite quotes by Picasso is, inspiration has to find you working. And I am a big believer of a very strong work ethic. I photograph constantly, and I put myself on it, and I only work in film. So if I'm not shooting, I'm processing.
I can verify this, because he'll be going into a restaurant and he's like, should I bring the camera? I'm like, do you think we're going to find an image in the restaurant?
You never know.
He's never without his camera, and he's got a lot of cameras.
Yeah. I'm like, which one should I bring? And
Gotcha.
Always trying to work that way. I'm always, as any artist knows, you've got to be scrappy. You've got to be always putting it out there and networking. Right. So if I'm not working, it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm always.
But I photograph. This particular time has been very challenging in terms of strategies of getting artwork to people.
Yeah.
Right.
That has really, it's been an incredibly difficult and fraught time. And yet at the same time for us, there's been a silver lining of that forced us to consider our work in different ways. Yeah, different that media. Turned out to be very powerful. Like we have across the street from our house, this big open hayfield. And we thought, well, people can't go to a museum or a gallery safely right now. So why don't we put artwork outside?
Yes.
And just wander around in our field, or they could just drive by.
Well, and we have been talking about doing this for a long time, but I finally said, well, there's no time like the present. There's nothing else to do.
It was like, this was the impetus we needed. And within 3 days of saying, let's do it, we had an artwork out in the field. Yeah,
we had a piece that was 12 feet wide, 3 days later, finished.
Nice.
And so that was, working that way, I think, is very much the way that we
It
work.
was really gratifying, and it was also incredible to have people drive by, maybe people who don't consider themselves gallery people or art people.
Sure.
They would slow down and they'd honk and they'd go, "Thank you, this is so cool." You know?
Well, we have our second season of the Hayfield Art Show up right now, and yesterday they had a huge bike race thing here in Vermont.
There's like hundreds of bikers
and
going
people are
down our
stopping,
road.
going, "Oh, look, sculpture!" I'm going, "Yes."
Yeah.
People are engaging with the work, and that was
That's
really
awesome. Very, very cool. Now, Greta, of course, is not as old as we are per se. So obviously she's a young adult. Clearly, I see she just graduated from Stella Adler. Oh my gosh. But before I ask about that turn of events, clearly she's much younger, and I have children myself, and I see the detrimental effect that it's having on the younger people of the world here. So curious to ask, she's got you for great influence, but how does she navigate her own course right now? Because everything is very, very uncertain, especially in the acting world right now.
Absolutely.
Yes. Greta, she was here with us for almost 13 months.
Yes.
During the pandemic. And so is her boyfriend, Steven, who's an actor as well.
Okay.
And they were doing stuff on Backstage, you know, still applying, trying to keep the networking going. She was still in school.
And
but,
doing everything via Zoom and online.
But difficult, as you can imagine. And
Sure.
then our other daughter, Ilsa,
Yes.
who's in high school, she just did a 5-week singer-songwriting course at Berklee College of Music.
Nice.
So, but I was commenting to some other parents. I said, you know, I'm listening to the songs the kids are writing, and I realized this is the first time these kids have actually been able to be together with 600 of their fellow, you know, music enthusiasts in almost a year.
Sure.
And it was interesting seeing the level of emotions.
Lots of emotions.
I mean,
Yes.
there's always lots of
you can
emotions, but this
see
was like,
how, you know,
Yeah.
that it's clearly, you know, being a kid, you're this is going to be lifelong.
Yeah.
You know, the moment of this.
But I also think, though,
the power and impact of it.
and the kids have seen our work ethic, that even during the pandemic, during really difficult times, very isolating times,
Mm-hmm.
kept working. We found ways to engage. If I can't work, I'm going to practice. It's the practice will eventually benefit in the work. And I think they see that. And so one thing that I love is that both of our daughters being interested in the arts, they've grown up in the arts and they understand how difficult it is and how sometimes it's great and sometimes you're like, oh my God, you know, chew your food slower, you know, and you have all these sort of.
They're finally getting to be old enough where they're like, okay, now we understand why you were always dragging us to museums and concerts and churches.
Yes.
What was that all about?
Yeah. And
Like,
art is. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I think that I hope that they take their creativity and their work in their various arts-related activities as a source of solace during challenging times.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you typically specialize in documentary style type filmmaking. So my question to you is, will there come a point in time where Greta will actually want to be integrated, or you want to integrate her? Because sometimes shooting with family, again, is, yeah, it's a joy.
I've used all of our family as models in my work in the studio.
Oh,
Ever since they were born, they started showing up in pieces. So Eve is my primary muse model and everything that I do. If I need to. But I've thought about that. I've thought about, do we maybe want to make a different kind of movie? We are doing a.
We should probably explain that making these movies was another reaction to the pandemic.
Well, we refer to ourselves as filmmakers of necessity.
So so any artist can confirm that trying to communicate their artwork on the internet is really frustrating.
Especially when it's really big work.
Right.
Dealers of mine in the past have always had the problem where how do you convey a 4x4 or a 4x8 foot piece that has really intricate, lovely tonalities on an iPhone? You just can't.
And we were making these works, we're making 12 feet photographs, 30 feet long. And I'd put all this different text in. Yeah. How do you communicate that to somebody who's not in the room with it?
So,
and that's when we hit upon the idea, let's turn it into a short film. Yeah. And we started going in and I would read the text as over him panning through the artwork and zooming in and pulling out. And that's how we got into filmmaking completely by accident.
Yes.
Wow. Look at that.
It truly was like the first movie we did like on purpose was the artwork A Wonderful Plague. And I literally ran out to Massachusetts at the last possible second when everything was shutting down for one day.
This is in March of 2020.
It was March like 15th. There were no restaurants open. You know, I found a place to
This is
stay.
that moment when everything
Yeah.
was shutting and, you know, just total panic was ensuing. And people didn't know what was going to come next. And Steve's like, I gotta go make this photograph. I'll be right back.
Well, and we got back and I made the piece and then I started making a small movie. I said, we're going to make this little tiny, kind of like how I'd done some in the past. And then we shared it with a friend of ours, Rick Kador, who's an Andy Warhol Foundation fellow now. And he commented back, he goes, you know, y'all, if you had a little bit more, this is actually a really great movie.
So he's a curator and a critic. So he ended up adding some text as well. And he reads that in the film.
Yeah.
Some commentary about this idea of doing an artwork about pandemics during a time of pandemic.
So the kept sort of spiraling and spiraling and spiraling. It got bigger and bigger. And then.
So now we have a 20-minute film.
24-minute
film that people can go to our website and they can watch.
And then we decided to start entering some film festivals, which I'd never considered. And our publicist, Gail, the person amazing, had recommended, you know, something like Film Freeways. And I said, okay, I'll take a look into it. I built a site. And at that time, we were also working on 2 other small movies. It was just fun. I mean, I taught myself everything from color grading to sound editing, you name it, as fast as I could. And we all of a sudden, you know, have like, I think 7 or 8 movies now in festivals all over. And it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of work putting them together. And I'm still learning. I have so much to learn. And every time I do a movie, I go, next time I'm going to more B-roll. I always say need B-roll, but I really, or I want to maybe change, like have more footage of me actually making the pieces. I always have footage of Eve writing, but there's almost never any footage of me actually shooting, making the pieces. I've considered having like one of those drones that fly over you so I could have it film me. Because so often I'm off by myself.
And that's one of the things that when we talk to groups of artists, we say documentation.
Everything.
Document everything you do. You never know when it's going to be really useful to have that. You know,
absolutely. Now, this is an interesting question because, again, like I said, I'm an artist myself, so I know a lot of fellow artists. So one of the things we talk a lot about when we're doing film is, of course, financing of film. And we all know that artists make 6 figures a year. That's a joke, deadpan. So since we're not making 6 figures a year, talk a bit about this because I know most of my audience are artists. So how did you make it work? Because when you're, you know, when you're doing one after another, and we've done it too, it's time consuming, it's expensive. You have to work with people and beg for everything. So how did you make that work without it driving you nuts financially?
I taught myself how to do everything. Truly, like, I mean,
Did I mention he's technical?
Yeah,
he's very good at that.
I'm filming and photographing everything of the films with my iPhone. I'm doing everything on the systems that
and in some ways, we're doing it all wrong.
Oh, totally.
You know,
this is not the way it's supposed to make it.
Don't listen to them. They don't know.
No, like crazy storyboarding, you know, and I'm not sitting on location lighting. For instance, the piece that we did on The Home of My Choice, which is on Alexander Twilight. I contacted the organization. They allowed us to camp in our Airstream on the museum's property, so we had no expense
this is the
going
old
there.
Stonehouse Museum.
Yes, in
Brownington,
Vermont, way in the Northeast Kingdom.
So we had this idea to make an artwork about this place, and then we learned more about Alexander Twilight, who's a renowned educator, who's the first person of African-American descent to graduate from college in the United States.
And the first person elected to a state house.
A state legislature. So we're learning more about this. We're like, okay, how do we take all this information and put it into this artwork? And that's when we had, you know, Steve makes this big, beautiful artwork. We start working with the historical documents. We create this seven panel artwork, I think.
Sure.
And
that one's actually bigger. That one's more than 7.
You think it's 9? Okay. Well, anyway, many panels.
Yes.
And we make this film to go along with it. And then when we were able to show this artwork, what was so cool was that the venue, this is in Burlington, Vermont, Burlington City Arts, let us show the film.
Both of them actually.
As well as the artwork itself. And this was, you know, all about this history of this renowned educator here in Vermont, who, unless you live here in Vermont, you probably haven't heard of. So that was fascinating experience.
Yeah, so we do a lot of work. I mean, we make three primary kinds of artwork. We make history-inspired work, where we're working with historic institutions and stuff, and sometimes we can get some support from them out of that.
Oh yes, we're supposed to be talking about money.
Right, so we get support. We also do work
We
that are.
do apply for grants.
We also do works that are fiction pieces and
Yeah.
pieces that are site-specific pieces. So we make three primary kinds of work. You know, grant funding's big. Institutional support is really nice. Burlington City Arts actually has a line item in the town's budget. So they actually pay the artists to do shows.
Nice.
And they pay actually quite well, and it's still your work. I
And
mean,
that's
they're
one of the things that
really
I've
supportive.
learned as we've worked together is to say, you know, ask.
Always
So, do you
ask.
have a budget for
Yeah.
this? Because don't assume they don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
that,
In the
always
smallest
good.
institution, or I can say, if you don't have a budget, perhaps we can help you find some grants that'll give you a budget. But by
Nice.
doing everything that we can in-house,
that also helps.
and that happened a long time ago, back when I was working in the traditional large format wet darkroom, living in a small town at the time it was like 930 people. You know, I couldn't just send out to get anything. I couldn't just send stuff off to a framer. I had to buy glass cutters and mat cutters and do everything in-house myself. So when we started doing the movies, and I have friends that have done very successful, what I consider like, you know, real movies.
Sure.
You know, they've got like, you know, crews and everything on it with them. You know, I've looked at that and say, what can I do myself in-house? And there are times that I hit like a barrier where I have to find a way to get around it. But as long as I can keep it to where it's just me having to do it, that's huge.
I get you.
Yeah, and then I bounce it off a lot of people. I have a lot of very generous friends in the industry that will watch.
Very nice. Now,
And that,
this question I know the answer to already, which is, of course, it's a combination of all of the above. But if I pressed you and I said, all right, during the course of making the film, there are some that say that what makes the film successful are the words accompanying it, whereas others might say it's the visual aspect of it that makes it, you know, par on where everybody will love to watch it. So if I had to pinpoint you and say, pick only one, which do you stand by, which makes a solid and more successful film? Visual or written?
well, in our case, I would say the visual, only because only because the way we show the movies, her words still show up and you can
Right.
read it. So whether they hear, I mean, hearing her voice is so great. I love it in the pieces because it echoes
See, I'm going
in
to
my
disagree
head.
with you now.
Really? I was kidding.
I'm going to say you can't separate the two.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. That by seeing the words
That
and the
yeah,
visuals,
it's a complete work
Yeah.
of art, and taking one piece out, it's not finished.
and there was this wonderful what was that movie that I liked? How We Made Art and Art Made Us, or something like that. And they were talking about how, like, in the history of humankind, it's the idea of the visual, the movement, and the sound,
Oh, how isn't it how art made the world?
and how we made art, or something like
Something
that. It's
like
great
that.
because that PBS.
Okay.
Great documentary
Really great.
about the history of art.
And they were talking about in the very end Aboriginal art and how it tied together movement, dance, visuals, sound, smells, all those things come into play. And it's
Sure.
why for such a long period of recorded history, it translates down very, very well. I find that when people watch the movie or when they read one of the actual artworks on a wall, because of the way she's writing the pieces, and the pieces are so big, there's a very physical relationship. People are up and down and moving. And when they walk in a room, they see the visual. And then when they get close, that part of your brain that does words and letters all of a sudden lights up. And so, and if they're watching a movie, they're hearing her
So
voice,
there's engagement on all these different
all
levels.
these levels.
Sure.
Atomizer there, spraying like a great, you know, scent of bacon or something. We have everything covered.
Well,
But
that'll be in our next.
That's the
one.
next piece, yeah.
I
But it's-
gotcha.
It really is, though, that sort of engaging of so many of the senses.
Absolutely. You betcha. Now I want to split you up a bit and I'll talk to Eve now. First thing I want to ask you about is the year of no sugar. Because I'm in menopause and I would probably disagree with everything you say because sugar is the only thing keeping me normal at this point. So talk a bit about this, because to the people that are listening in, I know what the book is about, of course, which is literally you spent an entire year without indulging in sugar. So first of all, how do you not kill someone doing that? Because I think it's almost necessary for all of us to have some vice. And then most importantly, tell us a bit about one thing that you solidly learned that anybody listening to this really should, even if you don't cut it out completely, there are reasons, maybe even something we don't know, why sugar can be so harmful for you.
Okay, so this is goes back to 2011, and our kids were ages 6, right, and 11.
Yeah.
Yes, and at that time we had a lot more control over what happened with them, and they
Yes.
didn't really realize that they could say no to this. So
Sure.
this idea, I had always wanted to write a book, and I had this idea after watching a 90-minute medical lecture that a friend of mine had posted on Facebook.
Mhm.
And it was Dr. Robert Lustig, who's very famous in the world of sugar, and talking about the hazards of it for our lifestyle in the Western diet, and how it causes it is correlated with every modern major health epidemic that we suffer from today. Everything from, obviously things like obesity and metabolic syndrome and diabetes, but also heart disease, hypertension, liver cancer, you name it, it's related to all of them. And so he's saying excess sugar in our lifestyle is the culprit. We need to address this. And it just absolutely caught my brain on fire. It seemed to make so much sense that I went to my family and I said, I have this idea. I think we should see what happens if we try to live for an entire year without sugar, and I would like to write about it. And again, kids were really young. They burst into tears, and and then, as it turned out, that was the hardest moment of all, was telling them about it. After that, they're kids. They were very flexible.
Yeah.
They were very adaptable, much more so.
That's how you remember it now?
Yeah, that's how
Cool.
But it's actually true. I think it was much harder on people who were grown-ups and
Yep.
much more used to being able to have sugar in their everyday diet.
Sure. Oh, you bet. Plus, we as a society do that too. So that's why I'm wondering, like, how do audiences embrace this book? Are they like, oh, this is ridiculous, you can't do this and blah, blah, blah? Was it a harder sell for you? Because we're all so used to that.
We are, and that was the biggest problem I found out, which surprised me. It was not things like cravings and feeling like I was depriving myself. It was going places and having impact on other people. Because once we got into a rhythm and we got rid of all the sugar in our cupboard, we started getting acclimated to it and got used to it. And then you'd go out and you'd go to, in particular, a celebration, a birthday, a holiday, gets-togethers with relatives. And it was so much more challenging, and it would take us by surprise because we were used to this new way of living.
Sure.
In particular, going to the grocery store was something I was astounded by, because I used to spend an hour at the supermarket shopping for my groceries for the week. But then when we were excluding sugar from our diet, added sugar, I was amazed at all the things that sugar was in, products that weren't even sweet. 3/4 of the items for sale in your average supermarket have added sugar in them.
Oh my gosh.
I had to take a magnifying glass and a dictionary with me because there's so many names for added sugar.
Well, I think also it's important to specify the definition of the sugar that we did. Because
fructose. So, and there, I can go into a long explanation, but basically fructose is the thing that causes so much harm in our bodies. So that is, when we think of granulated sugar, 50% of granulated sugar is fructose, and that's the part that's bad for you. Glucose is fine, because glucose is something we need every day in our lives. It's fuels our cells. We cannot survive without glucose. It's what our body turns all of our food into. But fructose is something you go your entire life, you could go without ever having it, and you would never be the worse off for it. So
Wow.
this is, so it's, and people often would ask, well, what about fruit? Well, fruit was fine as long as we ate it in fruit form. If we decided a glass of apple juice, well, that was not fine, because it had been, the fructose had been extracted from its original source, which had so much fiber and micronutrients, the original apple. And those are the things, as Dr. Lustig likes to say, those are the antidote that counteracts the poison being the fructose. So this is all, it gets, I'm, of course, not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a concerned parent and somebody who did a lot of cooking and a lot of shopping at the farmer's market. And I thought I knew what was in my food when I began this project. And I had a lot to learn, and I wanted to be able to translate it to the average reader and say, here's why I did what I did, and here's what we found.
And telling people things that the sugar was in that they wouldn't believe, like smoked salmon, mayonnaise. Almost every single bread at the supermarket has sugar. Baby food has sugar. All this formula. And it's in, and so what you realize is that people are eating, you know, like an ice cream sundae worth of sugar every day without. This is just the hidden sugars.
Oh my God.
Oh, what is like if you have like a glass of, well, I know Eve always talks about this, like don't drink your sugar, but like a glass of orange juice has as much fructose as.
It's like 5 oranges. Now, you would never be able to sit down and eat 5 oranges in a sitting. At least
of course.
Right? There's a reason for that. We're not supposed to.
Right.
That's, you know, that's the takeaway.
But the amount of sugar in orange juice is.
So in answer to your second question, what I like to tell people, the big takeaway, sometimes people will come to me and they're very taken with the idea and they say, I want to do what you did. I want to do a year of no sugar.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, good for you, because that's huge. But also, don't feel that you have to do that. That's not necessary to get the benefits of what we learned by doing it for my blog and for our book. Sure. There are a lot of takeaways that you can get from our experience without having to go through the grueling process that we did.
Gotcha.
And number one that I always tell people is don't drink your sugar, because that is the #1 culprit of added sugar in the American diet today. So obviously no soda, no sweetened teas, no sports drinks, you know, but, you know, essentially you're left with water. I mean, vitamin water, sugar.
Sure.
You can have coffee, you can have tea, you can have water, you can have sparkling water. You can, we actually have one of those soda stream things, so we can make our carbonated water, and you can get flavorings, or you can put lime or lemon in there. But if you do that one thing, just don't drink your sugar, you will significantly improve your overall health and diet.
Yep. Nice. Now, I want to ask you about writing style a bit, because you and I both have written for magazines. I own a magazine, obviously. I know you used to write for the Boston Globe, the Vermont magazine. And when I talk to specific writers about, everybody seems to have their own genre. Some jump around all over the place. So tell me a bit about the positive in doing this sort of writing with your husband versus, you know, strictly writing for the magazine itself. And do you still write for periodicals? Because it sounds like you have zero time for anything.
Well, that is definitely one of my challenges, is trying to sort of balance the artwork that we are creating now, which, you know, has we're very lucky that we have a boundless number of ideas to work on.
Sure.
And sometimes I have to say, whoa, I got to go and work on my other stuff over here, which is just my writing that I'm doing, and that's separate. So my first book was Year of No Sugar, and that came out in 2014, and my second book was Year of No Clutter, which came out in 2017. And in that book, I specifically addressed the phenomenon of, you know, we had such a decluttering phenomenon with Marie Kondo. I am a cluttering person. I am proto baby hoarder type. People say, oh, well, I don't believe that. You know, your house looks fine. And I'm like, yeah, but you haven't seen the room upstairs.
Yeah. Right.
And that's where it is. And I shut the door and no one goes in there. And so I decided what would happen if I opened up the door and told the whole world about this thing that I have, this issue, and tried to undo it over the course of a year and clean that room out. And I was moderately successful. I did pretty good. And now I'm backsliding. Spoiler alert. But it was a fascinating process. And so that was more about me, but also it did involve the other members of my family. So that was our second project. And my third and final family experiment adventure, we actually did during 2020. And not realizing what kind of a year 2020 was going to be, we decided to embark upon our Year of No Garbage. And that's what I'm in the process of pulling together the final manuscript for that book now. And that is also, you know, third memoir.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Well, my question is now at this point in time, are you even able to, like, the side writing that you're doing, do you still submit it? Do you write about specific things that you send off to publications to get published? Do you still interact with the magazines that you were writing for?
I do and I don't. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of competing interests. So I have to sort of, make my decisions on where to spend my time. And it is a difficult process, the applying, getting lots of rejections. We experience that also as artists, applying for grants, applying for shows, applying for, and I think that's one thing we try to teach both our daughters. Since they're both going into fields, it seems like Greta for sure as an actress, and perhaps Ilse in the field of music. We'll see. But this is something you have to be able to, be sensitive, and because being an artist is about being sensitive, but at the same time having that shell as well, and letting things just roll off. Rejection, just keep moving, right?
You bet.
In particular, right now, I actually am in the process of working on an article that'll be sort of talking about our year of no garbage and why we did it.
It's an opinion piece.
And it's an opinion piece. And so I'm constantly trying to you always want to keep your hand in and keep going in lots of different, you got all the pots on the stove.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And keeping that balance, which is really tricky.
And we have a thing too, when life is somewhat normal, Eve will write every morning, like after the kids are up at school.
Nice.
You don't like to write for more than like 2 hours.
I write for 2 or 3 hours, and then I sort of feel like, okay, now I got to go do other stuff.
So she'll do writing days a week in the morning.
But I do find that for me, there's a particular time of day that's most productive. And I also tend to work well on having that schedule.
Right.
And again, that sort of, what was the Picasso quote? Finds you working.
Inspiration.
Inspiration finds you working. You have to sit down and actually be doing the work in order for the magic to happen.
And so when she's not doing that writing, then in the afternoon I grab her. And I say, okay, now we have to go do this other work, or now we have to do these 4 grants that we've got to apply for in the deadlines.
Sure.
And so it's good. I mean, it's been difficult with everybody being home and stuff like that, but
it's also been good because, we both work at home anyway. For us, it's very sort of concentrate. We're able to concentrate on everything, focus, very steadfast focus on everything that we're doing. And that has been good for us.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Now, before I switch over to Stephen, I have one more question for you, Eve, as it relates to Stephen. If I were to ask you now, between now and the end of 2021, is there anything that you would like to see happen in Stephen's career for him? Is there anything where you're like really rooting, like, I really want this to happen for him this year?
Oh. If I could pick something, I would say that one of his artworks would be in the Museum of Modern Art.
That would nice. That's a great wish. It is.
That would be an enormous home run.
That would be great.
It would be. All right, now we're going to move over to Stephen. So first of all, I have to ask, because you used to serve in the military, which I did not know until very recently when I was picking around. That's a very large subject there. So I guess what I want to ask is, tell us a bit about, oftentimes when I try to interview people who have served, most don't want to talk about it. So it's a hard thing to kind of bring up. And obviously right now it's a very challenging time with lots of people in the military. So what I will ask is has that experience in some ways enriched you, not only as a person, but within your art as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was going to go to medical school before I went and joined the military. I was never going to be a doctor. That was never going to happen. But that was my plan. And I joined the Marine Corps instead. And I served in Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And the responsibilities that I had, the technical training that I had, I was a nuclear, biological, and chemical defense specialist. So working a lot of responsibility at a very young age. The discipline of you have to get it right or there's consequences really was in my work ethic. I have a very strong work ethic, and I absolutely credit that for the military. However, I knew I wasn't going to stay in the military about 2 years in, because on a Friday afternoon, I went out and I bought a little tiny camera. And by Monday, I took out a loan from the bank to buy a bigger camera. And that was it. I was bitten. The bug hit me. And because my field in the military was so small, I really couldn't change jobs into another field.
Like you couldn't have become a military
I could have, but they were really against it because they spent an awful lot of money training me for what I.
Gotcha.
So I was applying to RIT from the back of the USS Raleigh, sitting about 8 miles off of Kuwait, when the Wisconsin and Missouri battleships were on either side of us. So, I mean, I knew at that point I was going to get out. I was going to go to college. I was going to work in photography. But yet, it's funny because here we are 30 years now at the end of the Gulf War, 30 years since the Gulf War. And I think about that, and I think about the end of Afghanistan right now and what's going on. And we've actually started a new project this year called The Battlefield. We are visiting historic battlefields throughout the United States over the next 5 years and recontextualizing the battlefield. You know, less than 2% of Americans have ever served in the military. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. And they don't really understand what the military does and how it affects people long term.
Sure.
So we're looking at these historic battlefields and trying to reframe them as, yes, a place of honor and as a place of sacrifice, but also as a place of healing. And not just here come the reenactors, which I'm not really supportive of. More of the idea of learning from the history of these places and allowing it to people. And so we've now made 3 pieces in the Battlefield series. And the goal is to have, 30 or 40 pieces, and it'll be a traveling exhibition, and one that I hope veterans and the community and everybody can come around and find some healing and some peace through the work.
Absolutely. Now, it's been said by different people, and again, everyone has their different take on it based on their own experience. But I have yet to meet one person that didn't say that everyone needs a form of therapy. And for some, and like in your case, is art or photography a healer for you, or maybe you came away with very little to heal from?
I was very fortunate in the Marine Corps. I mean, I wasn't in combat. I was part of the 4th Marine Expeditionary Brigade. We were in the theater of operations the whole time. So I don't a lot of the trauma and that people, especially in the most current wars, have been having. So for me, though I do suffer from PTSD from the stress of being in the military and the environment and the amount of time, I find that my photography and making art gives me a real strong sense of balance. And when I'm not making work, Eve knows this, I'm not happy. So I constantly like to be engaged in some part of the creative process, whether it's making a photograph, whether it's problem solving something, whether it's writing articles about some aspect of photography and sharing it with the community. I'm always trying to do that.
Gotcha. Now, I read that you had started something called, is it Figtel? Is that how that's pronounced? Figtelrevolution.com?
So back in, it's digital, and digital film digital. So back in 2005, I started this website where I was going to tell the honest truth about what was going on in the industry. At the time, I had very deep connections in the upcoming digital printing industry. I had been a master printer in the traditional darkroom, even I had written for magazines, and I had done a myriad of different companies. And I decided to sort of just put it out there and just say, here's the lie that you're all being told. Here's actual information on how to do a particular process that maybe you have never heard about. And I wrote on the site for the better part of 15 years. And there are hundreds and hundreds of free videos and articles that people can listen to. However, I never found a way to monetize the site. It was really difficult. This is before a lot of the current
money.
Yeah. So recently, when our daughter's boyfriend Steven was here, being an actor, he started a TikTok channel, and now he has over 3 million viewers. Then he started a YouTube channel, has over 1 million viewers. And literally less than a year. And now he's in Ireland right now filming a TV series. And a lot of this is what he did during the pandemic.
This was his switch of strategies.
And watching him doing it and listening to how YouTube and all that works nowadays, I've now launched the Digital Revolution 2.0 on YouTube. And I've done 17 videos so far in less than 25 days. And my goal is to try to do a video every 3 or 4 days in some aspect of photography and art and creativity. Some are on location, some are here in the studio. And I enjoy it. I teach already privately one-on-one with people.
Right.
really enjoy that aspect. And that's what I kind of enjoy about the digital revolution, is that I'm throwing this idea out there, and I love when there's this engagement and people are asking questions. And it also works as a visual diary for me. I sort of joke, a lot of times I'll say, how did I do that process back in 2008? And I'll go to Digital Revolution, I probably wrote about it. And I go, that's how I did it.
You look yourself up.
I look myself up, I look up the article that I wrote, and then I can go do it again. So it's helpful for me in that way, but I'm enjoying it so far.
But I think it's important to point out that Phygital, it began and continues now as like sort of this very interesting moment in the history of photography, where you've got all these traditional techniques that were supplanted by digital techniques. Right. And Steve's point has long been that we don't need to sacrifice one for the other. Right. You've got people in each camp, and they're both going, no, mine is better. No, digital's better. And he said, why can't we use all of these things to their maximum advantage? And that's where Phygital comes from, film plus digital.
Well, and I think also back in the early 2000s, there was this big push by the digital photography industry to kill off analog photography as fast as possible. For instance, I used to go to these big photo shows at the Javits Center in New York City. And one time I went, and it's this myriad of cameras and darkroom equipment and everything. The very next year, 90% of that was gone. And it was Apple, and it was all the new digital cameras. I was working with the companies at that time, and I'm in the back room hearing them talk about software problems and how stuff isn't right, and yet they're out there telling everybody that it was. And that made me really angry, because photographers are investing their energy, their money, their time in a product that isn't ready.
Sustainable?
Well, and they've been saying for years, like, as megapixels get bigger and all that kind of stuff. I sit back, here it is almost 20 years later, and I still work in film because I think film looks better. Now, I do a hybrid form where it's film and digital. I'm shooting film, scanning, but I've yet to see anything in the digital world that I think, even to this day, supplants what I can do in the hybrid world. And so it just makes a lot of sense. And then you see it in Hollywood too. I mean, how many great movies are still being made on film? And there's been a huge uptick in wanting to do that. And I'm glad that it's been well received. But and then the videos are fun to make.
Absolutely. I bet. You betcha. Now, I know that I had read, of course, that you have success more than once, obviously, in receiving grants, obviously, in this particular case, the Vermont Community Foundation. So I would be remiss in doing my job if I didn't ask someone who is a game in regards to this. If somebody's watching this today, give them the top 3 things that they need to know to be successful, or at least you believe is success as it relates to writing a grant at this day and age, especially.
I hate grant writing. Let me just come out and say it. I think the grant writing, I think that the problem with grant writing is that a lot of people get funded that I can write a really great grant. I wish the grant writing, if I could have a magic wand, I would have grant writing be done the way Film Freeways is done.
Sure.
You build a platform where you present who you are. Maybe you have a cover letter and that's what's submitted. The problem with grant writing is that anybody will tell you, you either need to hire someone who knows how to really write grants, who's done tons of them, or who's been on the boards reviewing. In a lot of cases, the content is exactly the same between what you wrote and what someone edits. It's just the way they edit it is what the grant people want to hear. And I find that upsetting, because I always feel it should be the quality of the work that they're asking for and not the specifics. I understand the way the grant writing process works. So recently we applied for a Creative Capitals grant, and we hired someone who is like an expert grant writer to go through and review our process.
To be fair, I did the writing. And
she does, she does the bulk of the writing for the grants. And then we go through and we review everything together. But I find grant writing, it's still, as our friend Rick says, you should have 100 rejections every year. And if you're not writing a grant, what's wrong with you? Go write a grant. Go find the money, because it's out there.
And it can be challenging because it is not our favorite part, right?
But
it is really necessary.
But once you have a grant, it's easier to get a second grant and another grant. Grants build grants. And grants build institutional support. If you've got grants from certain places, it builds support because people believe, in the product. So, and they know you can do what you say because you've got these grants supporting you.
You bet.
I would just say, write as many grants as you possibly can a year.
Okay.
Apply for meaningful ones, and accept the rejection letters. I mean, I hate it for weeks on a grant, and then you get this, a rejection letter that doesn't even have why you're being rejected.
Well,
It's
it's
like-
always nice when they give you feedback.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
that's how you can use constructive.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, 12 art books. So the biggest question that I have when it comes to that, because in this case, I know that you do the photography side of things as well as put it all together in this beautiful artistic piece. But it's been often said by photographers that I have spoken to and I've read that photographers have such a way, what makes them so wonderful at what they do is that they're able to capture whatever is on the other end of their camera lens in such a way where no one else can do that. So for us as writers, I think it's much easier to say we know when the well's drying up or when we know that we're going in a way where we're not using words as magically as we used to. So on your side of the fence, you've done this 12 times now. So how do you know what's at the end of your lens people are really going to appreciate or admire at this point?
I make my work for me.
Oh, okay then.
You can't make work for anybody else. If you make work
Okay.
for somebody else, it's a mistake. You
Okay.
have to make
You
your work.
are your first audience, right?
Yeah, I'm the audience that I'm thinking about. If I don't like it, then no one else is going to like it because I'm not going to show it to them.
Sure.
So it's got to be me first. I'm making the work that I want to make. I'm very cyclical in my process. I sort of go back and revisit stuff, and I'm sort of always borrowing from stuff that I did a decade ago and trying to repurpose it. I also like to think that I draw from a lot of other art in my work. I draw from poetry. I draw from painting. I draw a lot from painting. I draw a lot from the environment where I'm at. So I'm sort of use photography because I can't draw and I can't paint. Like the works that I make are all one of a kind. I never make more than one of anything that I do as well. And that to me is about, I always say my best piece of work is going to be my next piece.
Sure.
So always thinking about that next piece. And as I said in the beginning, I like to always be on that knife edge of success and failure. The moment I'm comfortable making a body of work, I stop. Because if I'm comfortable, I'm not pushing myself, I'm not challenging myself, and I start to just feel like I'm being formulaic. And
Gotcha.
she's always like, don't stop, this is really great. And I'm like, no. And he said, I've got to make it. So I try to keep the process difficult. I try to keep it convoluted. I don't take notes about anything, so I keep everything in my head. Unless it's unless I actually wrote it down. But like the way I work in my studio is completely in my head. And I do that on purpose because I don't want to be looking back to books and journals. I'm much more intuitive when I work. I like to be more spontaneous.
I get you. Now, we often talk about, I've said this repeatedly on my show in particular, which is oftentimes some of the best actors, artists, writers, etc., all come from a very dark or tragic place. So I've also heard photographers say at times that some of the deepest art comes from some of the darkest places. So you don't seem like a man who really goes to that dark place, or do you?
I definitely have, from my military experience,
Okay.
huge anxiety and stress place that's there. I've lost people in my own life, my father, and people who mattered a great deal to me. And I've drawn upon those pieces and that energy in previous bodies of work. I'd like to think of myself more as like a cinematographer and as a filmmaker who has just one frame or maybe a few overlapping frames.
Sure.
Tell that story in. And that's really, I guess, what I'm the most interested in is telling a story. And if the story has to be dark, like A Wonderful Plague, if we're telling a story about all the people who died, at the pest house in Provincetown, to me, that's this tragic. At the same time, it's hopeful because it tells all of us we've all been through this before. This is part of human existence. And so it depends on the pieces. I wouldn't say, I'm definitely not a person who's obsessed with the dark side. That's for sure. Because I know photographers who are. I know photographers who everything is doom, gloom, and end of the world, and every project and every artwork they make. I'm definitely not that, but to me, it's whatever kind of story I want to tell is where the artwork's going to go.
Makes sense. I get you. Now, before we go back to the general questions, my question, of course, is for Eve, if you were to say one thing you'd like her to accomplish professionally before the end of 2021, what would that be?
A published article in New Yorker.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
On my that, or New York Times bestseller. That'd be
that's
too.
it. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. Who doesn't want that, right? Like, okay, well, we just want this, or we just want that. That sort of good stuff. I totally get it. I do.
Well, I think having like that is really important. Like every day we sit down in the morning and we have a book that has short-term goals
And
and
long-term
long-term
goals.
goals.
Oh, nice.
Every single
Yeah, this is
day.
something we instituted over about a year ago,
Yeah.
maybe.
And it really,
It helps us focus.
Yeah.
What do we want? How are we going to get there?
and then you have your deadline type stuff on there, but we're always adding, what's a goal? Like, what would we like? I'd like to be in this film festival. Okay, how do we get there? I'd like to have this grant. Okay, what's the deadline? And we revisit it every day and make sure that we're working to achieve that goal. I'm a big believer in setting goals. Really big believer in setting goals.
And I wouldn't be surprised at all if you said to me, do you ever have your children holding you accountable? Because I find that too. Sometimes my kids will be like, did you ever get around to this, etc. Do they kind of stay in tune to what you're doing? Or are they just kind of like, well, they're just doing their thing today, you know?
Oh, they're definitely in tune with what we do, because it's kind of hard not to be in our household. We live a very full, immersive art life. There is no
Nice.
in our house where we're not choosing a movie that we're going to watch. We're not having some conversation about art or some video that I've just seen that I want to share, or an article that I want to share. We're very engaged in that 24/7.
Nice.
I think that both of our daughters are very accustomed to that.
Yeah.
And they know when to tune it out when they need to, I suppose.
Oh, definitely. I get you. And I know you said the one daughter is younger. So obviously now that Greta is a graduate, if somebody's watching this, has she done work yet? Like actual film work where she's been in something where people are like, yeah, let's catch her in this. Shameless promotion. Do we have anything that we can see Greta in?
She did a small piece a year ago in New Orleans, 2 years ago in New Orleans. She's right now in a performance at Stella Adler. They brought her in as what's called a job in. So she's there's another class of a 3-year student. She was in the professional night conservatory at Stella. They brought her in because they needed someone to fill the role. The director had seen her in her part and said, I want you. So they hired her to come in.
Nice.
She does have a few things I know on backstage right now where she's trying to set up.
But no film
interviews.
credits yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
In the making. Okay, gotcha. All right. I don't want to forget to talk about the most obvious, which is what you guys have going on at the present time. First of all, I know that you guys are screening because it's August. Is it every weekend or is it every other weekend? I want to make sure. And it's Rockabee. How do I pronounce that? Rockabee, Rokeby. How do you pronounce that? Rockabee. Yes.
Yes. That was a piece that we did on Quaker radical abolitionists who lived in northern Vermont on the Underground Railroad in Ferrisburg, Vermont. And that was a really great piece. That piece is actually going to be in the Queens Underground International Black and Brown History Month Film Festival coming up.
Yes.
And we're working on a...
So again, there's the artwork, which is a 30-foot long photograph.
Yep.
A collage on film.
Yep.
As Steve describes it.
Because all the works that I'm doing like that are all done in the camera. The overlapping frames and content is not something done. It's actually done. I adjusted the cameras in ways that I can do all in camera.
And then I worked with the staff at the Rokeby Museum to get different pieces from their archive. Quotations, quotes from diaries and letters and newspaper articles and all kinds of different written material. They have an incredible archive at the Rokeby Museum because the 4 generations of radical abolitionist Quakers who lived there were like me.
Kept everything.
Saved everything. So they have literally like 15,000 letters.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
Crazy.
Lucky for me, I did not have to read 15,000 letters. I was able to work with the staff and they said, here are the best letters. And so I went through those and I selected, I believe it was like 19 different voices throughout that 4-generation history of people, including Frederick Douglass, who was invited by the family who lived at Rokeby to come and speak at an anti-slavery convention. So I have a quote from that speech that he gave there. And as I said, diaries, newspaper articles, and so on, all these different quotations interspersed in and around the imagery, which comes from the homestead itself.
Yeah. And we actually just filmed, did a presentation there last weekend.
Of the film,
a question and answer sort of period.
Yes.
And all their films are available on our website, Eve&Steve.com, the letter N, like Eve, letter N, Steve.com, or on our Film Freeway site.
So anytime people can go and access these films and watch them, and none of them is longer than 24 minutes
Right.
long.
I saw that.
2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, we also do experimental films that we're doing that are real short-based films.
Sure.
Yeah, and so currently right now, we're working for a piece for New Mexico for 516 Arts. We're making a piece that's going to be part of an exhibition out there in Albuquerque. Albuquerque.
Nice.
And we have our the artworks that are currently up in the field, which is a current show that we're doing. And we're going to start offering, I think for the next couple of weekends, maybe a few weekends, like an artist come out into our field with us and they can tour the artworks and have to meet the artists, see the works together.
Nice.
We can do it safely outdoors, so that's not a problem. And lots of projects in the works though right now.
I think that's one of the keys that we have found is to have a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We work together and we have different strengths. That's one of the things that makes it work, so that it doesn't get like, you know, I don't know what's going on anymore. You know, we work together and we've got the organization and we've got the inspiration.
Well, and we both know what our strengths are. If someone has to sit down and sound edit and, you know, chop a movie up and all that, that's what's going to be me. If someone has, like, you know, who are we today for a project proposal? That's Eve, you know, and we'll review it together. We always look at everything together. She always wants to read it to me and I always want to show her the edits. Well, sometimes I don't want to show you the edits. But having that trust, I think that's one of our best strengths, is that even though we may disagree on something, and a lot of times I play the devil's advocate just because I really want to make sure that she really believes what she's saying. But I like the fact that we push each other.
Yeah.
Which is
very nice. Now, do I dare ask, so for the third and final, of course, Year of No Garbage, any idea when that's going to be completed, edited, and like, we're done now?
Oh, well, I'm more than halfway through the manuscript at this point. I have a lovely agent who is shopping it around right now. So I would love to say that it'll be out on the bookshelves in a store near you within a year.
Nice.
I would love to say that. Yeah. I'm just going to say that.
Sure.
She's just putting it out there. Yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's going to be that. I want to ask about the piece I saw on your Instagram. It was in July, so it wasn't that long ago. You were working on a 14-foot piece. Did you finish?
Ooh, which piece was that?
Was it the Dollhouse Transformer?
I can't remember now. I had been peeking at it yesterday and I was trying to look and I had my broken phone and I'm like, I got to ask him about that.
That one's done.
It was wrapped around trees?
I think so.
Okay, so that was a concept piece for us.
Oh, so okay.
It's a finished artwork. So whenever I need to make sure that I actually can do it, because I can think of a whole bunch of stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm actually going to be able to do it. Yeah.
And we're getting more and more ambitious in these constructions and sort of installations of works. And it all began with these giant, you know, I don't want to call them billboards because Vermont does not allow billboards.
Right.
In our hay fields, but they're works of art that are large and they're two-dimensional. And then we thought, well, what if we made something that was three-dimensional?
Right.
And we made something in the shape of a little house.
But it's like 16 feet tall.
Okay.
And that piece was for a sculpture show in North Bennington.
And it's on display.
North Bennington Outdoor Sculpture Show. They have it every year.
Yep.
And we made it interactive so that people could walk through this archway that we created. We have the photographs on the outside and we have writing on the inside. And we asked people with our writing, where do you want to go and who do you want to be? And then we put all these markers inside so people can actually trace their hands and they can answer questions.
The inside is filled
if you go to our Instagram, we have lots of documentation.
Yes.
All the really cool responses, little kids going, I want to be a lion.
But then the newest piece that I think you're talking about, we were at De Cordova outside of Boston, and it's this beautiful
outdoor sculpture park.
And I'm looking at it, I'm going, I want to do something here, but I don't want to build a placard. I've had this idea about making artworks that are maybe like 100 yards long that wind through a forest and that are tied to different trees, and then actually making the artwork there. So you're walking through the narrative.
Okay, so we're putting De Cordova on the bucket list.
De Cordova. I want De Cordova next. And so I said, I have to be able to know that, can I do this stuff? So I had enough vinyl in house. I said, I'll make a 14-foot piece.
So it's like vinyl canvas that you're printing on for these.
And some of these pieces can last, 10 years.
Sure.
They're very durable. So and then Eve paints on them.
We put grommets in them.
Yeah, and tied into trees and.
Like
Nylon rope.
Nylon.
Yeah. And so we actually should make sure it's still hanging. We haven't looked at it in a couple of days. But so the first year that we did the pieces was the first exhibition in the hayfield, lasted an entire year. I've got video of them in rain and snow and hail and all sorts of stuff.
Oh my God.
Hey, the birds were using it as their personal outdoor bathroom. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And I love that. I said,
well, it's great because you think about the artwork in a different way.
Yeah.
And it allows you to sort of let go of it a little more.
Yeah.
Sure.
Previously, we were so
everything's precious.
Everything's very precious, and you want it to last for like 1,000 years, and you're archival everything, and you can't be that way with outdoor.
No, this is God. I hope it makes it through the next windstorm or through the rainstorm. And we've gotten to the point now where the piece that we did for the Dollhouse Transformer that would last arguably 5 or 6 years easily outdoors.
Nice.
This piece, the proof of concept piece that I did down in our field, I want to let it sit for a few months, see how it maintains, see what happens when the trees move. What does that do to the vinyl? But so far,
yeah, so it's wound around some trees in the forest down by the river.
Yep.
And we've got 5 artworks in the hayfield that can be viewed by people driving by. We have a sign that invites people to park and walk and get closer to the artworks if they care to. And then if people keep walking and they walk all the way down to the river, they will find this little hidden artwork that is wound amongst the trees.
And it's only visible if you go there. You
cannot see that work from anywhere, from the road or anything. You have to actually
even from the river, you almost can't see it. You have to go into this little.
Sure.
So that was a fun, that's our most recent experiment.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That tells me that we can do it, and we'll build upon it. So everything's a building process. I figured out this, and
that's true.
now I know what I would do differently. If I made another one, and so it's a learning experience.
Of course, you betcha. Now, I don't want to forget to ask about the obvious. So, upcoming film festival, what do you have next? Can somebody go to an upcoming film festival to see you?
Depends on the festival. I mean, we're in festivals all over the world. I just got an email from the Dumbo Film Festival a few minutes ago asking us to submit a wonderful play for their upcoming festival. We get a lot of that. I get emails every day asking, hey, I saw this film at a sister festival. Would you consider submitting to our festival?
Sure.
But so many of these festivals, because of the last year, have been online only.
Yeah.
Right.
That's been one issue.
Yeah, and I think we have a lot more festivals coming up at the end of the year.
Sure.
Beginning of next year. Right now, I don't think there's anything, at least for another month or two, that's coming up.
But that's one reason that we want to have our works available on Film Freeway and
people
on
can
our
still
website
watch them.
anytime.
Well,
absolutely.
I want to do film screenings. We did this screening up at the Rokeby Museum, and I loved us sitting there showing our movie, talking about it, engaging with the people.
Sure.
And I love to do a thing where maybe we choose 3 films that come out at like 40 minutes long, and play 3 films and just talk about them, and talk about filmmakers of necessity. What does that mean? And just alternative ways. I mean, if you can't do film, if you can't put it in a field. I've got other ideas too on how to communicate this stuff. But I think that's especially now, artists have to find ways to share their work because the traditional methods are kind of broken currently.
Absolutely.
Strained. And if you want to survive, you've got to find those alternative methods.
Agreed, 150%, you bet. So the folks we've been talking to today are Eve&Steve. Their last name is spelled SCHAUB. The website, www.eveandsteve.com. I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts here. First of all, any good artist knows when they recognize talent in good artists. So I've been in the company of such for the last hour and 20 some minutes. So in case anyone hasn't said to you, your contributions equally as well as separately have touched the lives of so many people. And I don't think oftentimes enough you probably hear the words thank you. So thank you for the contributions that you give to everyone. Second of all, and most importantly, I admire and absolutely adore your spirit. The fact that you work so well together and yet so individually working so well together. Michael and I do things well together in both sides of the fence, but sometimes I want to scream at him repeatedly. So I love the fact that this dynamic here works so well, but we do have a lot of the same components. So kudos to you on making a partnership work so well, personally and professionally. You complement each other tremendously well. Third of all, if you had ever been on my show before, you would know that you never get out without a surprise, at least one. So in this case, I'm holding true to that. Lucky for me, I have the good benefit of running a film festival with my sweetheart, which is coming up this weekend. And I have a big festival, which I run without him, which isn't the worst thing because he's wonderful in it, but I don't think he could do this for 4 solid days in a row. So it would be my pleasure to ask you to consider screening and doing, it is a hybrid event, by the way. So we are live and we are also digital as well. So I will leave you to consider what you think you want to screen at my festival, but I would be remiss in allowing such remarkable work get away from me without screening it and without the world seeing it, because I'm blessed. And I'm already showing, I think, 50 films at this point. So I'm always of the vernacular of what the hell, it's one more. And, you know, you can't not have good art be a part of good cinema. You know, it all kind of flows together so well. So I'd appreciate it if you took a look at your repertoire, see what you think fits. And you can speak to me about this, obviously, after the fact. But I need even Steve Love there. I would be like, nah, it just isn't going to work. So I would appreciate that greatly.